Pause. Deep breath. Watch the oak table, the way the light lifts the grain, the way a single sealed packet lands in front of a future king, and changes the weight of the room. Before we go a step further, one clear note for the record: this is a dramatized reconstruction built from whispers, unverified reports, and long-circulating palace lore. Treat it as storytelling, not settled fact. Now lean in, because what follows lives in the tight space where myth and motive jostle, and a family that hates noise is forced to listen to its own heartbeat. It starts with a dinner at Clarence's house that wasn't about food. The seating plan felt ceremonial, yet no place cards were needed. Anne arrived without entourage, pale in the way duty can be pale, and carried only what mattered: a small purse with a single sealed parchment inside. No preamble. No, you may want to sit. She placed the packet on the table in front of William and kept her hands to herself, as if touching anything else might count as interference. Charles said nothing. Catherine read the air the way she always does and moved an inch closer to her husband. The seal broke with a sound you could mistake for nothing, unless you've ever opened something that cannot be unopened. If you're waiting for fireworks, you misunderstand this family. The Prince of Wales didn't shout. He read. The color stepped back from his face in stages. Breath shortened. A hand found the table's edge. A chair scraped, too loud in a house that prefers soft noises, and then knees failed him. Dizziness, the statement would say later, the kind of word chosen because it drains meaning cleanly. But in the moment, the room watched a body keep score for a mind that had run out of ways to pretend. Medical staff appeared and folded themselves into the choreography of calm. Anne didn't rush to help. That was the cruelty and the mercy of it. She had already done the only helpful thing she could: deliver a message she'd promised, long ago, to deliver. What letter demands a collapse? This is where the story folds back on itself: Balmoral, late autumn, the scent of beeswax and damp wool, the private archive that exists partly in inventories and partly in memory. After the funeral, when families do the work they never put on camera, and took on the quiet task she was born to do: steward what needed stewarding. Among ledgers and program cards and 1,000 meticulously kept ghosts, an unrecorded chest waited as if it knew her name. A small key, a velvet bed, a bundle of fragile pages sealed with a mark only one woman in the realm was allowed to use. The first line in that familiar hand: confidential. For my son's eyes only. The ache was in the pronoun. Whose son? Hold that question, because the first wound on the page didn't belong to genealogy. It belonged to promise. Years ago, in the difficult peace that followed difficult decades, an understanding had been stitched together. When the day came, Princess Consort would be the title: dignity without overreach, settlement without triumph. Public life is made of phrases that hold a country steady. This one was meant to cushion a reign. What the pages suggested, if you trust the law, was that the cushion thinned by design. Networks grew. Briefings softened. A coronation rehearsed a word the private pact had fenced. The letter didn't rage, it tallied. Respect, the late sovereign wrote, is not the same as trust. Where trust has been traded for convenience, a successor has not only the right, but the duty to restore the scale. If that were the whole story, the packet would have been heavy, it would not have been seismic. The line that bent the room came later, in a paragraph, so short it felt like a verdict. There is another son. The hand that wrote it, so steady across 70 years of signatures, showed the tiniest tremor. The description that followed was deliberately spare. A time of upheaval, a liaison never meant to survive oxygen, a birth kept inside a ring of people who took vows that taste like iron. Files existed, medical records, letters to a guardian whose loyalty outlived seasons, and a single photograph with the mean clarity of old film. Sharp jaw. Winter eyes. The kind of likeness that pulls breath from a man who spent his life looking at his own face on coins and in suns. If you think the next act was shouting, remember the house we're in. Anne, according to the version of this story that floats in rooms full of old furniture, had been asked years earlier to manage a problem before it became a reckoning. She did what she always does, cut cleanly. Identities were moved, lives were helped but not reordered, a fuse was pinched out without smoke. The late Queen, who built a nation's trust on the ability to swallow storms, kept the knowledge in paper, because she knew that paper is the only thing that can speak when you are no longer able to. The instructions, if you believe them, were cold and moral at once. If the truth threatens the line, choose the line. If the truth threatens the soul of the house, choose the truth. She gave the decision to the only child she had who'd never confused theater with duty. Rewind to the table, then, and to a man on the floor learning that fate is sometimes a moving target. The humiliation wasn't medical, it was arithmetic. For a lifetime he'd been taught that succession is a staircase carved in stone. In one page it became a map with a margin note. He didn't speak, because the words available, anger, disbelief, bargaining, didn't fit the grammar of the room. The king signaled the doors closed. Catherine pressed her palm flat to the wood to steady herself. Anne stared very hard at nothing. We're told there was no shouting. Rage wastes oxygen, and oxygen was already scarce. Silence isn't the same as inaction. The palace line said, fatigue, brief, bloodless. Behind the walls, the week broke cleanly in two. For 5 days William stepped back from the world and into a house that had been chosen for simplicity precisely, because life wasn't simple. Phones lit up, he let them die. Catherine ran interference the only way interference works, with warmth and logistics, and the kind of normal that keeps children safe without teaching them fear. Anne went to ground, which is different from hiding. The king worked, because grief in this family is nearly always metabolized by output. When the Prince of Wales re-emerged, the change wasn't theatrical. Paler, yes. Slower in the body, steadier in the eyes. He'd made a choice that reads well on paper and hurts in practice, to carry the truth, not to be crushed by it. 2 letters left his desk, one to the Prime Minister, one to the Speaker, quiet signals that the constitutional rails still hold even when the private road buckles. One meeting, whispered about, took place far from London with a man who has every right to hate cameras. They spoke longer than they intended. No titles changed hands. An envelope did, an invitation to a room without microphones. Reparations are not always checks. Sometimes they are chairs pulled back from the edge of a cliff. If you're listening for thunder, the house will disappoint you and save itself in the same hour. No royal decree. No midnight announcements. Just small edits that only people who live on the court circular notice. A ceremonial duty moved sideways. A calendar trimmed in a way that feels like prudence until you check what used to be there. And inside, a line drawn, not across love, but across influence. The difference matters. Families forgive, because families have to. Institutions endure, because they remember where their edges are. You may be wondering about the most dangerous half-sentence in the packet. The one that asked a question the Constitution doesn't have language for. What do you do with a life that, if acknowledged in the brutal mathematics of primogeniture, would rewrite 1,000 schoolbooks and 1,000,000 teacups? The answer the law gives is more human than legal. You tell the truth to the people who need to live with it, and you don't mistake exposure for justice. Succession follows law, legitimacy follows conduct. There are times when the first refuses to kneel to the second. When that happens, character has to carry what paperwork cannot. Somewhere in the middle of this, a tape appeared, old technology that feels more intimate because of it. A voice you can hear without seeing a face, precise, practical, unsentimental in the way of someone who believed love without steadiness is simply appetite. It wasn't a confession, it was a reckoning. You are my anchor to the future, she said, and then the line that matters more than any crown, be king by virtue before you are king by law. It is the kind of sentence a grandmother can say without flattery, and a grandson can bear without resenting. We're told Catherine listened first and left the room with the tape in her hands, because she knew it wasn't her line to cross twice. If the story ended there, YouTube would bless us with a neat moral and an even neater cut. But real life hates neat. Anne's part isn't over, because the hardest jobs in this family never look finished. She won't brief, she won't leak. She will watch like a metronome and keep time while men learn how to breathe with new information in their lungs. The king will bristle and then relent and then call for a red box, because the only way he knows to love without breaking the machine is to keep the machine moving. Camilla, if you believe the kinder versions of this tale, will find the dignified edges of a smaller silhouette and stand there without flinching, because grace under reduction is a test that does not appear on ceremonial lists. Anne William. Here's the part that keeps older viewers from rolling their eyes at drama. Leadership, when you strip it of costume and chorus, is knowing which truths heal and which truths break, and learning to carry both without punishing the wrong people. He will not read the page. He will not hear the voice. He will, if this story deserves its better ending, do the small work that makes a big thing trustworthy again, tell no tales, move no lines without law, protect children from legends, refuse to turn confession into currency, stand where people can see him doing the work that makes a crown useful, or unnecessary, depending on your politics. If you've made it this far, you've felt the pull of two contradictory hungers, to know everything and to let what matters remain behind a closed door. That tension isn't an accident, it's the modern monarchy's awkward bargain with the rest of us. We'll give you pageantry and service and the occasional glimpse behind the curtain. You'll give us enough quiet to make repair possible when we've hurt each other. In that spirit, take this whole tale the way it's offered, as a parable with sharp edges. Not a verdict. Not a scoop. A reminder that families, royal or otherwise, are rarely destroyed by one secret, and rarely saved by one revelation. They survive by the discipline to keep faith with each other longer than the news cycle lasts. So hold the first frame again, a table, a seal, a hand that doesn't shake until the second page. Whether you believe every word or prefer to file this under Windsor folklore, the lesson doesn't change. Titles organize a household, character organizes a life. If a crown is ever more than metal, it is because someone decides to deserve it in the dark where no one claps. If you think that's old-fashioned, you're right. You might also be relieved. If this kind of deep, measured storytelling keeps you watching to the end, tap like so the algorithm knows to bring you back here. Drop your take, what would you have done with that letter, and subscribe for the next quiet turn of the crown.